Imagine this. You're standing beside your father's grave. The soil is still dark. The flowers are still fresh. People are beginning to leave. Some wipe away tears. Some hug each other. Some promise to stay in touch. And somewhere behind you, a man who called your father his brother is crying louder than anyone else. Everyone believes those tears are real. Everyone except your father. Because long before this funeral, long before the flowers, long before the coffin, he already knew exactly who would cry, who would pretend, who would lie, who would steal, and who would finally be forced to face the truth. He spent 30 years preparing for one single day, not to destroy anyone, not to embarrass anyone, not even to get revenge. He waited for justice. And when that day finally arrived, he wasn't even alive to see it. People say the dead can't protect the living. They're wrong. Sometimes the strongest hand that ever guides your life belongs to someone whose heartbeat has already stopped. This isn't simply a story about death. It isn't even a story about betrayal. It's the story of a man who understood that time is more powerful than anger, that patience lasts longer than hatred, that silence can become the loudest voice in the room. My name doesn't matter. Neither does the city where this happened. What matters is that every word you're about to hear is true. There was a small house at the end of a quiet street. Nothing special. White walls, a narrow front porch, an old wooden fence my father repainted every spring even when nobody noticed. The garden was tiny, just enough space for tomatoes, a few roses, some herbs my mother insisted tasted better because they came from our own soil. Every evening, after work, my father would sit beside those flowers with a cup of tea. Sometimes he spoke. Most evenings, he simply watched the sun disappear. When I was little, I thought he was doing nothing. As an adult, I realized he was thinking, remembering, planning, carrying burdens none of us could see. My father belonged to a generation of men who believed love wasn't something you said. It was something you did. He never hugged us often. Never said, "I'm proud of you." Never said, "I love you." But every winter, he woke before sunrise, started the car, so the heater would already be warm before taking us to school. Every summer, he worked overtime without telling anyone, just so we could spend one weekend by the sea. Every birthday, he somehow knew exactly what would make us smile, even if it meant going without something he wanted himself. Only much later did I realize those were his love letters, not written with ink, written with sacrifice. Growing up, I honestly believed my father had lived an ordinary life. He worked, he came home, he fixed broken shelves, paid bills, cut the grass, changed light bulbs, helped neighbors, smiled politely, went to bed early. Nothing extraordinary, at least that's what I thought. Children rarely notice quiet greatness because quiet people don't advertise themselves. They don't demand applause. They simply keep showing up again and again and again. Until one day they're gone, and suddenly everyone realizes how much they were carrying. He was the second son. That mattered more than I understood. In many families, the oldest son inherits expectations. The younger children inherit affection. The second son often inherits responsibility, not because anyone says so, because everyone assumes he'll manage somehow. He'll understand, he'll sacrifice, he won't complain. That became my father's entire identity. Whenever someone needed help, he was there. When his parents became older, he drove them to appointments. When relatives needed money, he quietly found a way. When cousins argued, he settled the fight. When weddings had to be paid for, he contributed. Not because he had plenty, because he couldn't watch someone struggle while he had anything left to give. My mother sometimes worried. She'd tell him, "You can't save everyone." He'd smile, then answer the same way every time. "No, but maybe I can make today easier for one person." That was enough for him. He measured wealth differently, not by bank accounts, not by cars, not by houses, by peaceful sleep. He often said, "A rich man who can't sleep is poorer than a laborer who closes his eyes with a clear conscience." At the time, those words sounded simple. Years later, they became unforgettable. My uncle, his older brother, was admired by everyone. If my father represented humility, my uncle represented success. Expensive watches, tailored suits, luxury cars, business dinners, confidence. He knew how to enter a room, how to shake hands, how to make strangers like him within minutes. People called him charismatic, successful, intelligent, even generous, Children admired him, adults respected him, neighbors envied him. Whenever family gathered, he naturally became the center of attention. He told stories, made people laugh, paid restaurant bills dramatically. Everyone praised him. Meanwhile, my father quietly cleared the plates after dinner, refilled empty glasses, carried sleeping children to their beds. Nobody noticed. He didn't seem to mind, or perhaps he simply became very good at hiding disappointment. As children, we naturally compared them. Who wouldn't? One brother owned a huge house, the other repaired old furniture instead of replacing it. One brother wore expensive shoes, the other polished the same pair for years. One brother arrived in luxury cars, the other drove an aging pickup truck with faded paint. Success looked obvious, at least until many years later, when I discovered appearances are often the most expensive lies people buy. One evening, I remember asking my father, "Why don't you become rich like Uncle?" He looked at me, smiled gently, then asked a question instead. "What kind of rich?" I laughed. "The obvious kind." He chuckled quietly, then said something I completely ignored as a child. "There are many kinds of poverty that money cannot fix." I didn't understand. I wanted the big house, the shiny car, the expensive vacations. I thought my father simply lacked ambition. I couldn't have been more wrong. He wasn't chasing less. He was protecting more. Years passed. Life became busier. School became university. University became work. Visits home became shorter. Conversations became quicker. Like many families, we assumed there would always be another Sunday dinner, another birthday, another Christmas, another summer barbecue, another chance. Life tricks us that way. It quietly convinces us that ordinary moments are unlimited. They aren't. Then one autumn, everything changed. My father began coughing. Nothing dramatic, just enough for my mother to insist he visit a doctor. He resisted. He always resisted. "There are people who are actually sick. I'm fine. It's probably nothing." Weeks became months. The cough remained. His smile remained too, until one morning I noticed something. His hands, the strongest hands I'd ever known, were trembling slightly while pouring tea. He noticed me looking. He smiled, changed the subject immediately. That was who he was. Even his suffering, he carried privately. Eventually, the tests came back. The room became silent. My mother cried. My sister stared at the floor. My younger brother asked questions nobody could answer. My father thanked the doctor. Actually, thanked him. Then asked, "How long do I have?" Not, "Why me?" Not, "Is there another opinion?" Just, "How much time?" When we left the hospital, he looked at the sky for a very long time. Finally, he smiled. Not because he wasn't afraid, because he had already decided how he would spend whatever time remained. Not chasing miracles, not chasing sympathy. He would finish what he'd started decades earlier. We didn't know it then, but while we believed he was preparing to say goodbye, he was actually preparing to keep a promise, one he'd made silently to himself. 30 years before, and hidden beneath the floorboards of his bedroom, waiting patiently in the darkness, was the first piece of that promise, a black metal box that would change everything. The box looked ordinary, black metal. Its corners were worn smooth by time. Tiny scratches covered the lid. Dust clung to every edge as though it hadn't been touched for decades. My sister rested her hand on top of it. "I almost walked past it," she whispered. "There was a loose floorboard in Dad's closet. I only noticed it because the wood sounded different." None of us spoke. The morning sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor. Outside, birds continued singing. Cars drove past. Neighbors walked their dogs. The entire world continued exactly as it always had, completely unaware that ours had just stopped. There was a small brass key taped beneath the box. Attached to it, a folded piece of paper. My father's handwriting. Even before opening it, my chest tightened. His handwriting always looked careful, patient. Every letter shaped slowly, as though words deserved respect. I unfolded the note. It read, "If you're reading this, then I've finally gone home. Don't waste your tears on me. Use them only if they help wash away your anger. Everything inside this box has been prepared with love, not revenge. Please remember the difference. There are 7 letters, one for each of you. Read only your own. Read it alone. Read it slowly. And trust me, one last time. Nobody reached for an envelope. Not immediately. Instead, we simply stared. 7 names, written one by one. My mother's, Mine, my sisters, my younger brothers, my aunts, our family lawyers, and my uncles. My stomach twisted. Why would he leave one for the man who had barely left our father's bedside during his illness, yet somehow had always managed to make every conversation about himself? My mother quietly picked up her envelope. She looked at each of us. "I'll be back." Then she disappeared into the bedroom. The door closed gently behind her. The rest of us waited. No television, no phones, no conversation. My younger brother made tea. Nobody drank it. The clock on the kitchen wall seemed louder than ever. Every second echoed. Tick, tick. 40 minutes passed. Then the bedroom door opened. My mother stepped outside. Her face wasn't wet. She hadn't been crying. That frightened me more than tears ever could. She looked different. Not angry, not broken, certain. Like someone who had finally found the answer to a question she'd carried for half her life. She walked into the living room as if fate itself had been waiting. My uncle knocked on the front door. He smiled warmly. I just wanted to see how everyone was doing. He walked inside carrying fruit, flowers, his usual charming smile. He hugged my sister, patted my younger brother on the shoulder, then turned toward my mother. She didn't move. She simply stared. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, my uncle smiled awkwardly. "What?" My mother's voice remained calm. So calm, it almost sounded gentle. "You have 1 hour," he frowned. 1 hour for what? Take everything that belongs to you, and only what belongs to you. Then leave. He laughed. Actually laughed. "I think grief has confused you." My sister, "You don't mean that." She placed one folded letter on the table, face down. "Read it. Nothing else. Just read it." He looked around the room, almost expecting one of us to laugh. Nobody did. His smile weakened. Slowly, he picked up the paper. His eyes moved across the first paragraph. Nothing changed. The second, still nothing. Then the color disappeared from his face. His lips parted slightly. His breathing changed. His hands began shaking. He read the page again, then a third time. He looked toward my mother's closed fist, toward me, toward the floor, toward the ceiling, anywhere except her eyes. Finally, he folded the letter carefully, placed it inside his jacket pocket. Without saying another word, he walked out. The front door closed softly behind him. None of us followed. None of us asked what had happened. 2 years passed before we saw him again. And during those 2 years, nobody ever asked my mother what was written inside that letter. Because sometimes a person's face tells you everything words never could. I waited 4 days before opening mine. 4 days. The envelope stayed on my bedside table. Every morning, I looked at it. Every night, I looked away. Part of me wanted to know. Another part wanted my father to still have one last secret. Because once I opened it, there would be nothing left waiting. On the 5th morning, before sunrise, I sat alone inside my car. The neighborhood was silent. I held the envelope between both hands. It felt strangely heavy, not because of paper, because of everything it represented. I finally broke the seal. Inside were 4 handwritten pages. The first line stopped me immediately. "My child, if you're reading this, then you've already survived the hardest part, saying goodbye. Everything after this is simply learning how to carry love without expecting another conversation." I couldn't continue. I closed my eyes for several minutes. I simply listened to my own breathing. Then I kept reading. "You've always believed you were the sensitive one. You tried hiding it, just like I did. Please don't. The world has enough people pretending not to care. It desperately needs people who still do." My eyes blurred. Not because the handwriting was difficult, because every sentence sounded exactly like his voice. Slow, gentle, certain, he continued. "There is something I've protected you from your entire life. Not because I wanted to hide the truth, because I wanted you to grow without carrying my bitterness. Children deserve peace before they inherit pain." Then the story began. 30 years earlier, he and my uncle had started a business together. Not with investors, not with inherited wealth, with savings. Years of savings. Money my father had earned working nights, weekends, holidays, every extra hour he could find. He trusted his older brother completely. When documents needed signing, he signed. When accounts needed opening, he agreed. Because that's what brothers did, or so he believed. Months later, the business exploded. Success came quickly. New clients, new contracts, money, recognition. Then something changed. Meetings stopped, including him. Documents disappeared. Bank statements became difficult to access. Questions received vague answers. Eventually, he discovered everything. His ownership gone, his signature copied, his investment transferred. Legally, it looked legitimate. Morally, it was theft. He wrote, "I remember sitting alone in the car that night. I cried. Not because I lost money, because I lost my brother. Money can be earned again. Trust cannot." I stopped reading again. The morning sun had begun rising. People were leaving for work. The world looked exactly the same. Mine no longer did. I turned the page. I wanted revenge. For almost a year, I dreamed about exposing him, taking everything back, watching him lose what he'd stolen. Then one evening, I watched you sleeping. You were only 6 years old. I realized something. If I started a war, you children would become the battlefield. I refused to let that happen. So I forgave him publicly, not because he deserved forgiveness, because you deserved peace. But forgiveness does not erase responsibility. Justice simply waits longer. Inside the final page, another sealed envelope rested quietly. Across the front, my father had written only 6 words. "Now, the truth becomes yours."